The cost was losing our languages, losing our native tongues, losing our native religions and ways of being, our traditions, our customs. It's the reason that we don't have rites of passage here in the United States. It's the reason that many of us don't speak the language that our great-grandparents spoke. My name is Jeddy Azuma, son of James Glendon Azuma, son of Valeria Cecilia Estock Azuma. I was born in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and my family comes from Japan on my father's side and Italy on my mother's side. Farther back than that, my relatives go deeper into Japanese and Mediterranean roots, into places that I don't yet know. I haven't connected with that part of my ancestry. But I know that my people came to these United States of America, this country, this Turtle Island as native folks call it, and made a home. And that's where I come from. I introduce myself in this way because this is the way I was taught by some of my elders, some of my teachers. Often we skip through introductions really quickly, or when you meet somebody you exchange your name. But in old ways, in traditional ways, nothing happened before introductions. And there's many functions behind this. Number one, you can't start to engage in honest, authentic relationship with somebody if you haven't told them who you are. If you haven't presented yourself in a respectful way, honoring the legacy that you come from, your father, your mother, sometimes even farther back than that, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Sometimes introductions would take a very long time when tribes of people from different areas of the world were meeting each other, because they knew in order for us to have a respectful dialogue, it required that we knew who we were talking to and that we presented ourselves as a representative of our entire ancestral line. So, I practice introducing myself this way because for me, it's a reminder of where I come from, first of all. A reminder that I am the product of many generations of others who fought in their lives, who did everything that they possibly could to survive, to take care of their children and pass their wisdom and energy forward so that I could be here today. Every time I say my parents' names, I bring them alive. Fortunately, they're still alive on this planet, but even after they go, every time I say their names, it gives them life again. It's a bow, it's a reverence, it's an honoring of all that they did in their lives so that I could be here. And the same for them, and same for my grandparents. Every single time those names are spoken of, and I speak about where I come from, speak about the stories of my ancestors, it's a reminder of who I am and what it took for this human being that you see in front of you, talking to you on this podcast, talking to you on this video, that I'm the living, breathing product of thousands of generations of humans. And beyond that, who knows? Who knows where we came from? But it's also a way, if I was meeting you for the first time, to really see and understand who it is that you're speaking with. If I don't really tell you much more than my name, then all I am is a name. There's no backstory, there's no context to who I am. You don't know where I come from. You don't know anything about my parents or how I was raised. So the more information I give you, the easier it is for you to trust who you see in front of you. Now obviously that requires you to actually trust the words that I'm saying. But when we all learn to conduct ourselves in this way, and we can introduce ourselves from a place of respect, from confidence, from assertiveness and authenticity, then there's a degree of relationship that happens that's possible right away. Right away when I meet somebody and they tell me exactly who they are, where they come from, what their relatives had to do so that they could be here in this place right now. When I tell you that my grandfather came over from Japan when he was 2 years old to start a new life with his mom and open a grocery store only to be put in an internment camp during World War II, literally a prisoner of war, and then volunteered for the United States Army as a translator after being put in essentially a United States concentration camp. If I tell you that, then you know a little bit more about me. You understand where I come from, who I am, what I represent, what I stand for. And therefore, you know what type of conversation we can have, what you can begin to expect from me. So it's so important that we begin to honor these ancestral lines, because one of the greatest breakdowns in our modern reality is that most of us are the children of colonialism. We are the children of immigrants and migrants, people who came from other places to make a new life, based on new hope and promise of a different way, a better way for their future kids and future generations. But in the process, there was a cost. The cost was losing our languages, losing our native tongues, losing our native religions and ways of being, our traditions, our customs. It's the reason that we don't have rites of passage here in the United States. It's the reason that many of us don't speak the language that our great-grandparents spoke. Because in order to assimilate to this modern country, we had to discard some of those ways. Some of our relatives decided that speaking a different language in a foreign place made you an outsider. It made it difficult to belong. And so we lost that. I don't speak the language that my great-grandparents spoke on either side. Sometimes that brings up shame in me. Sometimes I feel like, how could my ancestors hear me speak to them if I'm not speaking the language that they knew? But we got to make the best of what we've got. I can't go back and have a sit-down dialogue with my ancestors. I can't ask them to teach me all the things about our relatives and our ancestral lines that I never got to know, because those stories weren't transmitted down all the way to me. So what can I control? What do I have power over? What do you have influence over? If you don't know your ancestors, if you don't know where you came from, you can speak to what you know. You can introduce yourself the way that you know how. Say your name. Say your parents' names. Say where you come from, at least your story. Maybe you were adopted and you don't know your parents. So what? Say that. Introduce yourself. Say, I never knew my biological mother and father because I was adopted. I was raised by Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so in this town, in this way. This is what they taught me. They raised me on the values of family and love and connection. Whatever that is, speak to it. Let that be true for you, and recognize that even if you can't go back in time and gather that ancestral information and share it with other people when you introduce yourself, you can start a new ancestral link right now. Just the fact that you're living, breathing, walking this planet, you are a link in a chain. And maybe you're the very first link in the chain, starting over from scratch because you don't have any information about where you came from. Let it be so. Maybe you only know a few generations back, so you're the third or fourth or fifth link in your ancestral line. Whatever it is, speak to that. Give reverence and honor to who you are and where you come from, so that people know who it is that they're speaking with. And when we all start to introduce ourselves in this way, and we all start to speak to who we are from the onset, then the depth of conversation, the depth of problem solving and collaboration that we can access is limitless. It's infinite. So next time you have an opportunity to introduce yourself to somebody new, tell them who you are. Tell them about your parents. Tell them about where you came from. Right up front. Maybe it'll feel awkward. Maybe it'll be a little weird. They'll wonder, why are you telling me all this information? And then you tell them to go check out this podcast. Tell them to come check out this video and see if they can resonate with the power of saying more about who you are and where you come from before you dive into other conversation. Get to know who the other person is and express who you are. Be proud of who you are. You're the product of thousands of years of ancestry that is so glad to see you on this planet. Just think about how many ancestral lines died and broke apart because their story stopped being told, or because they didn't have children. There's entire races and tribes and sectors of people who were wiped off of this planet for different reasons. So the fact that you're here is a miracle. Don't you think your ancestors are happy that you're here? Still carrying their DNA, carrying their wisdom and their energy forth into future generations. So honor that, respect that. Be grateful and humble by the fact that there are so many people that you will never know, whose names and stories you won't know and probably can't even comprehend, who did everything they could so you could be here. Deep bows, lots of respect and love to your ancestors, all the people who did what they had to do so that you could be here listening to this, having this conversation with me. And I ask you to share this message with somebody else who needs to hear it. Spread this word. Spread this idea of how we can introduce each other and introduce ourselves so that we can be in more relationship, deeper relationship with one another. So we can take on all the problems that this world's got, because there's a lot of them. And the only way that we're going to do it as a big global community is by coming from a greater place of respect. So if you dig this message, if you're feeling the vibe and you love what we're saying here, please share this with your community, send it to a brother, send it to somebody else who needs to hear it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening to the podcast or watching this video, and let us know what you think about the Rising Man movement. Go to risingman.org and find a way to become a bigger part of the Rising Man movement today. Much love, fam.
Rise up and claim your destiny.